Thank you for visiting Past the Wire TV, the YouTube channel of PastTheWire.com.
You have to run to stay in front. Welcome.
Unfiltered on Past the Wire TV. Welcome to yet another episode of Unfiltered on Past the Wire TV. And no, this is not a clown show.
Dan Oman here with some exciting news. DRF Formulator, the gold standard in past performance information, is now free exclusively on DRF Bets. Join DRF Bets with the promo code WINNING. Get a $250 first deposit match bonus, a $10 free bet, and free Formulator already uploaded to your account. Access Formulator's premium features, including sortable trainer stats, race replays, personalized trip notes, and lots more. Free Formulator exclusively on DRF Bets.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Unfiltered on Past the Wire TV. This one's a little different. You got to love a man who pays his debts. Respect to my co-host, Michael Wilson, in unusual costume for today due to Secret Oath not performing up to his expectations in the Preakness. Welcome, Michael. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. I mean, the day's just started out and it's getting better. I mean, I've had some fun kind of playing around with this look, hitting a couple bushes, and people ran for their lives when I jumped out of them. So it's kind of fun. I might keep it on for the rest of the day. Maybe wear
I was going to ask, is this a look that might stick? I mean, is this like might be the new Michael Wilson? Might we see you at the races like this?
You never know. I mean, you never know. I think it would go well with a suit. I mean, I've got a nice blue jacket and I could wear a red tie. It'd all work.
Would Fasig-Tipton let you bid if you showed up that way at a sale? Or?
I think, to be honest, John, it's if you have enough money. They'd probably let, as you talked with Mike Ivorone yesterday, right? They might let him into the races naked if he paid enough. Right. I might be, if they knew the wallet was big enough, I'm sure they'd oblige, but you never know.
No, they would. They let me in that Ferrari dealership when it said by appointment only, because they snubbed me. I was in shorts and deck sneakers and like a tank top, and didn't look like I had 2 cents. And I was like, hey, dude, I got a checkbook, man. I'm coming in. And within 5 minutes, they were saying, do you prefer red or yellow? And so
exactly.
You never know. Quick take on Secret Oath. Disappointed? What did you?
No, I was kind of to be honest, probably more sentimental about her, right? I like the filly a lot. I think she's got a lot of talent. I think she's going to get better throughout the season. Obviously, I think Wayne said before the Preakness that he was going to wait until, was it the Alabama or the Coaching Club American Oaks he was going to wait for? He was going to give her a break.
Yeah, I thought he said the Alabama, but don't hold me to it.
Right. And so I think she'll get a little bit of time. And a lot of times with these 3-year-olds, when you back off of them for a couple months, they hit a big growth spurt. They kind of fill out a little bit more. So I think she'll get better. I thought the race was, I mean, the pace was not terribly fast, but I thought it was a pretty honest run race overall. Didn't provide her anything to close into, but heck, I mean, you know, she made a run and, you know, she proved that she's probably one of the best fillies and maybe not up to the task of colts.
Yeah, no, for sure. And, you know, you mentioned something that we're going to talk about today, time and timing between races and the trend of that, which I think also ties into the trend of horses starting less over the course of a year, or not as many times as they used to in the past. So that's one of the things we're going to talk about today, which I think is an interesting subject. And, you know, we'll explore why that happens, if it's better for the horses, worse for the horses, and even if it's, you know, an impact on the bettors as well.
Yeah, no, I think it's an interesting, obviously it's a topic everybody's talking about with, should we change the Triple Crown? I disagree with that, but I think a big topic that might not be talked about enough is we keep throwing so many big races into the calendar that some of these horses don't necessarily get downtime anymore, which is crucial for any athlete, really.
I agree wholeheartedly on both points. I think that, you know, changing the Triple Crown is just a ridiculous and unnecessary idea. I don't even know why we're still talking about it. You know, I've mentioned it recently several times, and I wind up mentioning it every time this comes up. You know, it's a streaky kind of thing, the Triple Crown. Back in the 70s, when we had Secretariat break that long drought, which Riva Ridge would have broke the year before him if it didn't rain for the Preakness, but Secretariat broke the long drought. We then had Seattle Slew and Affirmed, and people back then at the races were saying, you know what? We got to make this tougher. Too many horses are doing it. You know, we got to make this a little harder. Now, oh, we got to change it again. It's supposed to be difficult. It's supposed to take a special kind of horse, a special kind of trainer. It's one of the most elusive things to accomplish in all of sports, not just our sport. I don't think it needs to be changed at all. I think it's tradition. I think it's fine the way it is. That said, when you get away from that, I think you know, the fact that we see horses run less is a bit of a troubling aspect, and I think it goes to a lot of different issues in the game. You know, one thing that I came to become that I became aware of recently that you probably have a lot of insight into, and it's in Europe. Okay, a lot of the big barns, okay, barns like Aidan O'Brien and John Gosden and Charlie Appleby, Roger Varian, guys like that, they run their horses a lot more sometimes, and they actually run them into shape. I heard an interview with Aidan O'Brien the other day where he was talking about, you know, well, you know, we really think an awful lot of this colt, and we did from the very beginning, but we didn't expect him to win the first 2 times he ran, because the first time was, you know, really to give him an education. Second time was to get, you know, a little foundation, and, you know, he won third time, and, you know, this is really the time we expected him to win. That doesn't really help the people that bet on him the first or second time, but it shows a completely different methodology of training and bringing horses to races, and, you know, using races to train and get horses fit, as opposed to our way of training them fresh up into the race. And I guess it's just 2 different philosophies, and it ties into what I think we're going to talk about with the spacing of races.
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail right on the head. And I think it's actually something that we used to do, right? So if you think about it, when a lot of these horses were younger, they'd be in Camden, South Carolina, and they'd be prepped down in South Carolina, and you'd have these trials where these young horses would run against each other, and they'd use each other's horses to teach one another and build each other up, and then you'd go to the races, and you might win first time out from just the experience of that, or you might develop, but there wasn't this pressure. And it's potentially because of these big dollars spent on these horses when they're yearlings or 2-year-olds, but there was a longer goal in sight. And so kind of what I think where people might miss the mark is people go to sales, and somebody sent me a message about a horse yesterday and how much it went for. And I said, look, you know, it went for 625. And I said, the only issue with this horse is more than likely they're going to try and get it to break its maiden at Saratoga. And if you see religiously, these horses that break their maidens first time out at Saratoga are not around when the Triple Crown happens. They're not still in the picture. And so I think when you come at it with a long-term angle of, hey, look, we want a Derby horse, or we want a Preakness horse, or we want an XYZ horse, every race is preparation for those races. And you see it a lot in Europe, and you see it a lot in Australia, where you run these trials. Australia still has them. They'll take babies to the races and they'll do barrier trials, is what they call them. So it's literally a race, non-betting, and trainers are working, literally breezing and running their horses against each other to get them experience. And it's a huge piece of the learning curve for horses. I mean, I'll tell you right now, I used to get bet down to 6-5, and I don't know why people didn't pick up on when I trained horses. The first race was purely education. Most of my horses got beat by 20 lengths. I was atrocious with first-time starters, but they'd progress. So I'd use them as, okay, you're going to break, you're going to get dirt in the face, you're going to take kickback, you're going to learn to go inside, outside, you're going to get experience. The light bulb will flip on, and then now next out, you're better prepared. And if you win second out, or you run well second out, third out, you get better. Fourth out, you get better. A lot of these horses that win their maiden non-contested first time out, now you're facing winners second time out. So you're facing a better caliber of horse without ever encountering anything that made you push yourself a little bit, right? And so if you don't have the experience of kickback, or you don't have the experience of getting stuck in traffic and having to make a move and get through, now you lose. So now you've blown your confidence, versus first time out, they have no idea what they're doing half the time. Get them some experience, let them learn, build their confidence, then win with them second time out and keep going forward. But again, is it the money nowadays? I mean, to me, it makes more sense to just teach horses and let them get better as they go.
I'm glad you said that, because it's you know, one of the fascinating things to me about you know, some of our exchanges on this show are the, you know, trainer, horseman, better student of the game perspectives that we try and, you know, intertwine.
Yeah.
You just said something that you know, ties into something for me. As a bettor, one of the angles I love betting against and have made a lot of scores doing, especially up at Saratoga and around some of the premier meets, is betting against 2-year-olds that won first time out, got a big number either on the rags, Thorograph, or buyer, and one easy first time out, and then come back first time against winners and go off a short price, heavy favorite. Most of them lose. You know, a lot of them lose at short prices, and I've bet against many of them and beat them. And it's an angle I actually highlight and look for in my, you know, day-to-day handicapping. And it's been successful since, literally, I've been doing it since the 70s, and people have been betting those horses back diligently since the 70s, thinking they're going to run the same way against winners first time out that they did against maidens. Now, it's even gotten worse, because you know, back in the 70s and 80s, a lot of times they would run back in a non-winner or one, and those races would go and they were allowed. Now you very rarely see a 2-year-old non-winner or one. You know, so you almost have to run back in a stake where the waters are a little deeper. So it's even a better angle today than it was back then. It was really, really good back then, and it ties in exactly to what you said about horses not you know, coming back off those big maiden wins. And it ties into something else, because, you know, I always marvel at, you know, some of the people in our sport, okay, the investors in our sport are some of the most successful business people in the world. Okay, a lot of them inherited their money, okay, and a lot of them were born on third base, rounding for home, and you know, didn't have to make it on their own. But some of them did, and some of them were able to keep the money or even increase the fortune. okay? And when it comes to our game, as sharp as these people are in outside businesses, okay, when they come into our sport, they make the same mistake. They buy one horse for $1 million instead of 5 for 200,000. When it's a numbers game. How do you not get that? You know what I mean? Is it just ego at that point, or I don't know. But they make rookie mistakes, even though they've been playing the game for 10, 20 years. And it's always been a fascinating thing to me how people can be so savvy in other businesses outside of our sport, and they don't seem to bring that savvy over into our sport. And I think, like I said, it could be ego or just chasing that Derby, Breeders' Cup, whatever dream that it may be. But it's a fascinating aspect of people and the sport, to me anyway.
Well, I think the question is, and I don't know if it's necessarily the owners, because you and I both know this game has a massive learning curve, right? So you've been in the game longer than me, but I've been in the game 18 years. So when you come in fresh off, you got to look at it like whether you've handicapped for years, and you're different in terms of how you handicap. But some people will handicap races and they think they know the inner workings. The inner workings are still very inner until you understand the inside of the game. And I think a lot of the rookie mistakes are not necessarily on the owners. I think a lot of it is on who's advising those owners.
Oh,
and
no doubt.
You and I both know, right? Some of the bloodstock agent model, right? The 5% commission. It behooves an agent to spend $1 million on one horse versus spreading out the investment. Or you can always pin, and this is one thing that frustrates me, right? Look at my face, right? I said I'm wrong. I tweeted I'm wrong. I'm wearing face paint. Most people pass blame, and it's easy to pass blame. So let's say, because when we're talking about these first-time winners, whether it's Saratoga or Indiana Downs or wherever, a lot of times you'll see these horses break their maiden impressively first time out, and they're in somebody else's silks next time out. And that person has paid a massive premium for that horse,
Overpay.
which most likely is never going to do it again.
Right, and it's an automatic overpay when you do that. Automatic.
Exactly. And so there's times, and it was interesting because I had an owner call me and said, look, I want a Derby horse. I need to find a Derby horse for next year, and let's take a look. So I said, well, look, this horse broke its maiden impressively. And, what most people tell me, they're like, oh, you got to call right after the maiden. You got to buy the horse and you got to do that. And pardon my language, I said, bullshit. I don't want to call right after the maiden because all of you guys are offering far too much money for this horse. What I'm going to do is wait and watch him in that stake next out and see if he can swim or if he drowns. And if he drowns, then I know I didn't make a bad call. If he swims and he wins, okay, well, now we can hedge our bets. We're going to have to pay a little bit more, but if the guy has the budget to do it, I'd rather do it that way. Or if he hits the board or runs fourth, you have a horse that might go for it. You got a little bit more that you're dealing with. But the biggest thing is, and I literally think, and I've said this before and people don't like this is controversial. The Derby, the Preakness, and the Belmont are not the best horses in the country anymore. It's what's left, right? So these 2-year-olds, expensive 2-year-olds come out, break their maiden impressively, are pushed to make it to Saratoga, might try and get a couple wins at 2. Some of them don't come back. Some of them don't make it. We're sitting here waiting still for the champion 2-year-old to come back out, right? Where is he, right? So you get a lot of these young, talented horses push a little bit too much too soon. They're not around at 3 anymore. So the Derby and Triple Crown is what's left. Well, then what then happens from there is those horses that are at the top get retired at the end of the year. So some people say, well, what's the best way to invest? I said, you want to make the most money? They said, yeah. I said, target older dirt horses because the money for the purse money is more. You can buy them for less. Or older turf horses because there's no market for them as stallions. But a lot of people buy these, $650,000 2-year-olds to go run for $300,000 purses to then hope they win a couple of them to then retire off of them. Versus if you wait, now you're running for millions of dollars, and you could get a good older horse in between $300,000 and $700,000 and turn around and run for $1 million next week.
I would give credit where credit is due if I could remember, and I'm not slighting at all who or where the article appeared, because I don't remember. But I read an article maybe 6 or 7 months ago or so that actually took the time to research tax filings of a lot of the major owners. Okay. And I'm not going to throw out their names, but I'm talking about major household name owners that are winning grade ones all over the country all year long, that we are all involved in the game, familiar with the names and the silks. Okay. And the amount of losses they're claiming from thoroughbred racing on their taxes is staggering. Okay. It was literally staggering. And I'm like, if this guy or stable is not winning money, winning all the races that they're winning, how do you have any hope of possibly coming out in a black column in this game, you know? And I said, well, these are not stupid people. Obviously, they are not here to make money. You know what I mean? They're either writing off for other businesses and other sources of income, or just the well is so deep it doesn't matter. They're having fun and they just want to win the races. But making money, even at the highest level, and some of the most on paper successful looking stables, is extremely difficult to do if you're winning at the highest level. If you're not, you got no shot.
Well, I think it's no, and I still think it depends on how you manage the money, right? A lot of it comes down to making smart investments, not just making investments. Absolutely. And so, a lot of the stuff that we talk with our clients about is, okay, what's your ultimate goal? What's your budget? Okay, this is probably the best approach for you, and this is how we'll approach it. So we spread it out so you're not too far in, too quick, drowning, and then we're behind the 8 ball. A lot of it is, if somebody wants to win the Derby, well, then you need to buy enough horses for coverage to make sure a couple hit to pay for the rest that didn't.
Right.
And then you get a stallion deal out of it, and it pays for hopefully most of them. But when you're getting into it to a certain degree, you could go too hard, too quick, and go too deep, and then you're not making money or breaking even. I think what you mentioned was, these guys are winning all these top races at the top. There's an easy way to do the bloodstock game, which is, well, let's just go find what looks to be the best athlete, right? Let's go let's go draft the top 20 players. And, in that draft, if we get the top 20, a couple of them will work out. Sometimes, right?
Yeah, it doesn't work.
Yeah. So what's Tom Brady? Tom Brady, where was he drafted? If you're looking at the Warriors this year, look at Jordan Poole. Look at how some of these other teams put their teams together. If you really know the sport and you really know what a good horse looks like and what a good athlete looks like, you can find spots that other people aren't capitalizing on because they're just going after the obvious choice. Right. Because this is what I said, you can hang your hat on it. So let's say I'm an agent. Sorry, and I don't mean to flog people on this podcast, but let's say horse wins its maiden impressively at Saratoga by 6. And I tell my client, look, we should offer $600,000 for that horse. Okay. Well, offer $600,000. The horse can't win the non-winners of 1. Can't even show up in the stake, right? But can't win the A other than either. Well, I can say, hey, you know what? The trainer must have done something, or the jockey made a mistake. Or you know what? Gosh, you saw how that horse won. He was obvious. It's passing the buck versus coughing it up and saying, hey, I made a mistake. I didn't buy you the right horse. Right. So when you get into it, that's a lot of it is, oh, it was great at the sale, or, oh, the trainer. I remember when I was a trainer half the time, people said, well, the horse was good at the farm. Good at the farm? The right. Job's not to train the horse at the farm. The job right. is to have the horse on the racetrack so it can run.
They don't race at the farm today.
No, they love to pass the buck. And that's part of it, where you've got to have people with you who are honest, who are going to tell it to you like it is. If you bought a slow horse that can't catch its shadow, say, hey, you know what? That was on me. I bought you the slow horse that can't catch a shadow, but we'll go get you a better one.
Right. Yeah. No, you know what? You know what's funny, and it's not just our sport. Okay. What's the guy's name who owns the Redskins? Is it Daniel Snyder? Is that his name?
I don't know. I don't watch much baseball.
I think it is. I mean, that guy, he spent a ton of money trying to buy the Super Bowl and prove that you just can't buy the Super Bowl, Godolphin, years back, was on a campaign. We're going to buy the Derby winner. And anybody who had a 2-year-old that ran big, Come On Mom comes to mind. A lot of other ones, just
Two-step salsa.
right. Whoever won big, they were like, get the checkbook. How much do you want? And whatever number you threw at them, you were pretty much going to get, you know. They never won the Derby doing that. But it's not something that can't be done, because if you look at it, okay, Bob Baffert did it with War Emblem. He bought War Emblem after the race in Illinois. I want to say the Illinois Derby or something like that. Bang, won the Kentucky Derby. I don't know if you were there with him then or before.
No,
that.
I wasn't. But
Okay.
talk about Bob.
And,
what are Bob's 2 first horses, though? How much you pay for those 2? Remember?
Right, very little.
Right,
little.
90,000. I think it was 90,000 and 12 grand.
Right, and I remember after that, he started spending a fortune, didn't win, and then said, you know what, I'm going to go back to buying $90,000-$100,000 horses. But another guy who did it was the guy I had on the show this week, Michael Ivarone. They bought Big Brown after an impressive maiden win at Saratoga, ran him on the dirt, only after a Gulfstream race came off the turf, bang, won the Derby. So I think it can be done, but the 2 times it was done, it was not done by, you know, getting big bag of, you know, money and backing up a big Brinks truck to the seller to do it. It was just, you know, lucky, savvy purchases that did it, because it is really hard to buy a championship in any sport, including the Derby. But let's get back on track about the brakes.
Yeah.
Okay, the brakes in racing. Are brakes good for the horses and good for the sport, or is it bad for the horses, bad for the sport? Does it signify that they're not being trained properly and they're not as sound as they should be? I mean, there's so much that goes into this before we even talk about how it affects bettors, but there's so much that goes into it on the horseman side.
Yeah, I think breaks are a big piece. So if you think of any sport, every sport has downtime. Every athlete needs a period of recovery. And one of the trainers who I worked for that I have the most respect in the world for is Richard Mandela. And Richard prided himself. We had 8-year-olds, 9-year-olds, 10-year-olds running better at 10 than they did at 5. And if you looked at those horses and you ran your hands down their legs, they had pristine joints, ligaments, and tendons. He was very big on once a year, every horse got 60 days off, and every horse needed a break. And he would manage them as such, knowing, I remember there was one horse I groomed in his barn. It was funny when I was grooming for him. He gave me this Fusaichi Pegasus 2-year-old, and he was a pig. I mean, his stall was disgusting to clean every day. So I'd clean him. I was always frustrated with the horse, and he couldn't run. He couldn't catch a shadow at 2. And then at 3, he was still no good. And then at 4, I was on the Godolphin Flying Start course, and I saw, hey, this horse is starting to win some races. And at 5, I see him on a plane heading for Dubai. And I run into Richard. Richard says, you remember this horse? I said, yes, I remember that horse. And he says, so he waited 4 years. Horse won 2 or 3 grade 1s as a 5-year-old. His name was Champs Pegasus. But some horses take a timeline to get to where they are. You look at certain NBA players. There's guys who come in the league, bang, year 1. They're at the top of their game. They'll stay at the top of their game. You got other guys, they take a couple of years, and then they turn into champions, and then they have a long career. But you have to give them, every professional athlete will tell you that their downtime is needed, not only mentally, but physically. And so it's a big piece. And I think a lot of it with the racing calendar, how it's starting to get set up, right? You got the Saudi, you got the Pegasus World Cup now. Then you got the Saudi Cup. And then you've got the Dubai World Cup. What used to be a break from November to the Dawn Handicap, right? Dawn used to be the first grade 1 2-turn dirt race. You don't have anymore. So the question is, well, which races do you shoot for? Do you shoot for the money? Because if you go to Saudi and you go to Dubai, well, now you're shooting your horse in the foot for the next 3 months. So then you're hoping to be ready by, Whitney, some of those races. And so I think we're putting too much racing in. And I think maybe not for you, because you like to handicap and bet, but I think if we gave people an off season and then gave people an in-season to look forward to, it might actually increase wagering. I don't know. I mean, you tell me, what would you?
I agree with you, and you know, people will probably, and I'll probably be in the minority when it comes to bettors here, but and I might have answered differently 20 years ago, but yeah, I could use a break. I like a break. I think downtime and regrouping and refreshing is super beneficial. Um, I used to dread the dark days when I used to spend the whole month, and from I don't know, 30 years, maybe I spent every Saratoga meet up there for the whole meet. Okay. And I used to hate the dark days. You know, I mean, oh man, you know, dark day. What do we need a dark day at Saratoga? And I'm going back to when it was a 4-week meet, you know, and I think the only dark day was Tuesday. They ran every other day. Hated Tuesdays. It's like nothing to do. I'll go to Lake George, sit by the pool, whatever. Halfway through the day, I already had, you know, Wednesday's form and was, you know, couldn't wait for the morning. Now, I love the dark days. Okay, you regroup, you refresh, you just, you know, rejuvenate yourself in every way possible. So I think that one of the problems with racing is there's too much of it. Okay, there are too many grade ones all over the place, and it takes away the luster of them. I mean, you look at the Sir Barton on the Preakness undercard. It was a non-winner of one, non-winner of two race, and those races, and they're not optional claimer as well, they don't even fill anymore, which is a sad thing. You look at the early projected field for the Belmont Stakes. I mean, it's the Belmont Stakes. It's a glorified allowance race this year. You know, I mean, you might have one or two major players in there if you're lucky, but not really. That's a shame. That's really a shame. And I think a part of that is that we just have too many of these graded stake races, and even non-graded or listed stake races. And I think that ties into our lack of central leadership, central governing body, commissioner, and a business model of every track for itself. You know, so every track wants to have a graded stake, and they don't care when it runs or how it impacts other graded stakes. And I think over the course of a year, where you said we have no off season, it impacts racing across the board. I mean, California, I mean, there's a lot of issues out there, but that's one of them. You know what I mean? There's just too many races, too many other options, and you know, you see these 4 or 5 stake, you know, horse stake fields. We had one at Belmont the other day on the grass. You know, I think there were 4 horses. You know, I remember a time where you never saw that. You know what I mean? Where, you know, the Belmont Stakes, you were guaranteed a dozen horses. You know what I mean? And 8 of them were 9, 10, and all of them were quality horses. You know, and until we make some drastic changes in our entire business model, nothing is going to work, in my opinion. And if you look at all the progress that the Stronach Group has made at Santa Anita with horse welfare and horse safety, and I applaud them for trying and doing what they're doing. But the bottom line is, as successful as it's been there, okay, and hey, if it saved one horse, I'm all for it. Right on. You know what I mean? But for it to truly be successful for our industry as a whole, and to impact our industry as a whole, every racetrack has to do that. There has to be uniformity across the board, focused on, you know, the horse coming first. And I think that at the end of the day, maybe not right away, would tie into, you know, horses getting breaks. I think there's a lot of pressure, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there's a lot of pressure from owners. And we talked about financial responsibility for owners somehow being introduced into the game on an earlier show. And I think we both kind of thought that that's something that maybe should somehow be considered. But I think there's a lot of owners out there that get in the game and maybe don't have the financial means, or maybe just don't have the patience to say, hey, I'm going to do right by the horse. Give my horse the time he needs. I think a lot of them have, hey, my horse can't make no money in the barn. Run him. And they're pressuring trainers to run horses. I think you have racing secretaries that are calling trainers and saying, hey, we've only got 3 in this race on Saturday. We want the race to go. so-and-so, one of our favorite sons, got a horse in the race. We got to get this race to go. You got to put a horse in there for us. No, well, then maybe your stalls are in jeopardy. Maybe you need a favor you don't get. One hand washes the other. And I think at the end of the day, you could say all you want about how, oh, the horses come first and we love the horses. When you have that kind of business model where finances come before the animals and before the good of the sport, okay, the sportsmanship, which ties into the good of the animals, I think you got the wrong business model. I really do.
Well,
I think that ties into the breaks too.
I agree. And to me, I'm a person that is quality over quantity. I mean, I was always in the school of
less is more. Less
is and not just less, but putting quality forth in terms of, so when I was with Mandela, I mean, I went into other barns and operations, and same thing nowadays when I go interview trainers and I'm like, why don't you have more straw in your stall? Or why don't you have this? Do things to the best of your ability at all times and make sure that it's done that way, and everything gets better. And going off of that, you could either have a lot of quantity and you've diluted your product, or you could have quality and now your product is in demand. I mean, if you look at certain upper end brands, you talk Ferrari, we could talk Louis Vuitton, we could talk, if you look at profit margins, you could say, look, I'm going to just make fewer and charge more, or have less races with bigger purses and attract bigger fields and bigger handle. And you're going to get more with a little bit less, having to put it out there, versus saying, okay, we're going to just flood racing. And somebody asked me this the other day about, I forget it was, somebody asked me on Twitter about breeding. And I said, there's far too many horses in the breeding population that don't deserve to be there. Breed a quality animal. If you want a horse that can make it through the Triple Crown, breed a quality horse that can make it through the Triple Crown. When I see people buy mares, and no offense to anybody who's watching this show who has done this, and I apologize if you take offense, but if you take a claiming mare, $10,000 claimer, more than likely you're going to breed her to a $5,000 stallion. Well, all you're doing is creating another, I know you're going to have your Derby dreams, and I know you're going to hope that this horse is going to turn into something special. More than likely, it's going to be what it is. It's going to be a $10,000 claimer. You're just filling the bottom ranks, versus if you want to do it, sometimes people come to me and say, hey, I want to buy a nice mare. You can still buy a nice mare for $25,000, $40,000. And then you can still do a deal where you can probably get to a good stallion for 20. Now you're middle market. But we have so many. And to me, when I look at Saratoga, or I look at Del Mar, or I look at, even right now at Churchill Downs, you're running $8,000 claimers, $10,000 claimers at premier tracks. It doesn't belong there. They need to go to it needs to be lesser tracks, or we need to cut out those types of races entirely.
I agree. And I love Saratoga. I grew up going to Saratoga I spent every summer there growing up as a kid and into my adult life. But it's a completely different type of meet now that doesn't even look like the Saratoga of old that I grew up, when you had maiden special weight races filled with homebreds that were bred to race, not bred to sell. Non-winner of 1, non-winner of 2, non-winner of 3, even non-winner of 4 races with stakes horses prepping for the big stakes. Now you have, maiden 25, maiden 20 New York bred races all throughout the cards. You never saw those kind of races at Saratoga. It was a upper echelon boutique meet. The last meet to hold out that way that still exists in the United States, in my opinion. Overseas we have a couple like Royal Ascot, but I think Keeneland Spring has done their best to hold that boutique feel, and in their prime. And when Saratoga was in its prime, it didn't compare Keeneland, as good as it is now and as good as it's always been. It didn't compare to Saratoga quality wise. Today it does. And they've done better than Saratoga and Naira has in keeping that boutique feel and upper quality of horses. Kentucky Downs is pretty good at it, but their meet is only a couple of days, so I don't know that we can really count that. But Saratoga is just as great as it is, and it's still, you still feel the history when you walk through the doors, but it's not what Saratoga was. And I don't think it's what Saratoga was actually intended to be when that meat was started and cultivated into, what it became, as opposed to what it is today. And breaks and lack of breaks do create a challenge for handicapping. It actually is a challenge that I welcome. I welcome scenarios that a lot of people don't like. A lot of people don't like to bet 2-year-old races, okay, because you don't have a lot of information. I feel like I have an edge when there's less information, because information, everybody, including the CAW, the computer assisted wagering players, can analyze with computers and probability and factor this and factor that. And it levels the playing field to some degree if you have the right tools and you know how to analyze them. But when you have limited information, you have to rely more on your own personal knowledge, your own, that right side of your brain that just kind of leads you in certain directions. Bill Mott doesn't win with a lot of first-time starters, but when he breezes one like this many days apart, and starts him in a race like this, his percentage is 3 times as high as it is in all those other maiden special weights. Those are things that computer models and the average person doesn't know.
Right.
And that kind of stuff is kind of burned grooves in my brain after years, and there's just so many things that I remember, and the great thing about memory, the right side of the brain, and horse racing, is that history repeats, and things that you saw happen and you remember that don't show up on any computer or in any past performances tend to happen again,
Yeah.
And I jump on those opportunities. So, when you see breaks, there are certain trainers that win very successfully off layoffs, off certain type of layoffs, off layoffs only with certain types of horses. Like stats will tell you, hey, this guy is, X percent of horses 60 days or more. But what it won't tell you is, well, he's, 15% better when they're turf horses, or when they're claimers, or when they're sprinters, or when they're, this or that kind of, and those are the kind of things that I try to make note of and remember and score on, because I think it creates an edge that's not visible to everybody. If you know or see something that only a limited number of people know or see, it creates a tremendous edge, and those are the things that I like to wager on. So when it comes to breaks, I think horses should get them as they need. And although a lot of handicappers and bettors tend to say, you know what, I hate when horses are coming off layoffs, I never know what to do. I welcome that. You know what I'm saying? I look at that as opportunity, as opposed to, a hindrance. Hindrances, for the daily or average player, so to speak, as opposed to a pro or somebody been doing it a long time, we welcome that. You know what I'm saying? That just creates an opportunity and some separation.
Well, and I think that segues into the next section that we want to talk about. So we want to do our break and then jump into that, or continue onwards?
Let's just roll.
So I think the next thing that we were going to talk about was transparency. And this is something that I think could be a crucial move forward for the industry. I know
it's such a delicate topic for me, and I'll tell you why, but go ahead. Go.
So let's say a horse has a layoff. So when Kevin Durant goes down in a basketball game, we know the doctor's reports. We know what the team's saying. We know the timelines. We know the rest period. We know it's a torn Achilles. And we know certain things about that, right? When it comes to horses, we just see a disappearance and then a reappearance. And a lot of it, we don't know. We don't know what happened to the horse, why it happened, why it's off.
Let's put this question out there. Let me just interrupt you a sec. Does anybody know, has it ever been reported why we haven't seen Corniche since the Breeders' Cup win?
No.
I don't know.
I don't, and I don't know either. And I mean, I've seen him at WinStar. I've seen I've seen some of these other horses that are getting breaks right now in different scenarios. But again, a lot of it is to, which I think is somewhat a misnomer, right? So I remember one day I went to a stallion farm and somebody was saying, hey, this is the best horse we've ever had from this line, and soundest horse, never took a lame step in its life, amazing, phenomenal. And I said, did you pin fire his shins when he got to the farm? They said, what do you mean pin fire his shins? I said, did you pin fire his shins when he got to the farm? Well, why would we do that? I said, well, his shins have been pin fired. They said, yeah, they were pin fired. I said, they've been pin fired. He obviously had a lame period somewhat in his career where he needed pin firing. And they said, I said, look, it's okay. These horses are athletes. They have things that come up. It's okay to be transparent and say, you know what? The reason why he retired was he had an ankle injury. I get you're trying to protect the stallion's value. But when you give people more information, if I know that I have a mare that tends to throw ankle problems in her offspring, potentially, right? I mean, there's some horses, I know that I have certain mares that throw bad back ends on their babies, which is why we breed them to stallions with stronger hind ends, right? So when I know that information as a breeder, I can make better decisions. And this is something that you mention all the time, John. The only people putting money into the sport are bettors and owners. Well, if owners have more information to make better decisions off of for their operations, whether it's buying horses at sales or buying horses off of layoffs or doing or claiming horses, right? God forbid that we say, hey, this horse was vet scratched because it was lame left front and flexor in its ankle, you know, in the PPs, flexor left front ankle, right? But again, that gives a handicapper more information too. Oh, you know what? He was vet scratched 2 months ago because of a left front ankle, but heck, next start he ran the race of his life.
I get all of that. And as a bettor, I want to say, you know what? I believe and I want every bit of information that I could have about layoffs, about injuries, about ailments, about vet reports. And a lot of times, I will be honest, I look a lot of that stuff up. Most of the time when I handicap a card, I know horses that were vet scratched. I don't always know why, because it's sometimes not easy to find out why they were vet scratched, but I know they were vet scratched. I believe as a bettor, you know, the same way as if, see, I treat betting like investing. You know what I mean? I don't call it gambling. I call it investing, even though it is gambling. I look at it as more of an investment. I'm investing my money. And if I'm going to invest my money, I want to know everything that I can possibly know about where I'm putting my money. But I also understand the business side, and especially on the claiming side and on the stallion side, like you mentioned. Okay. I understand if I own a racehorse and I want him to be a stallion and I have hopes for a good stallion deal, and he's got what I think is a minor ailment that's not going to affect him, but that may have a negative perception. I've got money invested. Why should I have to share that information for the sake of transparency for some bettor? I get that side of the argument. As the bettor, I want the information, but as the owner, I understand it. On the claiming side, it becomes even more of a touchy situation. You know, you're running claiming horses, possibly to get claimed, possibly not to get claimed. We've talked in the past about, you know, running horses hoping to lose them, and that not being a very good practice and a very good thing for the sport. But it's something that happens that we've got to deal with until we revamp the claiming system. So I understand why a barn would want to be not that transparent, even though the bettor in me and the sportsman in me wants that information, and I feel ultimately that the game needs to adjust to it and throw the other side that I brought up out the window and say, you know what, transparency is more important. We need to know that these horses are being treated right for their injuries, what their injuries are, what the reason for the break is. And, you know, if it affects your stallion or it affects the chances of a horse being claimed, so be it at the end of the day. I mean, that's just part of the game. It is what it is. You've got to deal with your horse the way the horse is. And you know, so be it. But I do see the flip side of it and the reluctance and the difficulty that we will have to achieve the level of transparency that we would both probably like to see because of those issues.
Well, and I mean, you still see, so Kevin Durant got a max contract with a torn Achilles tendon that had,
Right.
nobody knew if he was going to come back the same, but they still gave him a max contract knowing that he's Kevin Durant. I
Right.
mean, there are a lot of things that happen to these horses. And I think, again, it comes back to education. So with people that we work with, we try and educate them as much as possible. When I say a horse is sore behind, they say, well, how can that be fixed? And I'll say, okay, chiropractor, MagnaWave, jogging, X, Y, and Z. This is what we can get into to help this horse's hind end and improve the horse, versus not necessarily understanding that knowledge and what to do with it, right? So I might have the luxury of not only being a trainer, I was a first team All-American athlete, right? I had a torn tendon in my shoulder, which prevented me from, training up to the Olympic trials. So when you understand injuries and you understand how they play and you understand they can be healed and they can be fixed and there's small things, they're not that big a deal. But a lot of it comes down to, I still think there's a pervasive mentality in horse racing of all the horses injured, it's done. No, the Tin Man, okay, Iron Horse. Everybody.
Absolutely.
A lot of people know the Tin Man. A lot of people don't know the Tin Man bowed both tendons as a 2-year-old. Okay, and Mandela will tell you that horse bowed both tendons as a 2-year-old. They split the tendon and they put why am I blanking on it? Cell regenerative therapy, stem cells. They injected it, they split it and put stem cells in the tendon, and they gave him plenty of time. They came back. I felt that horse's legs at 7 years old, 8 years old, 9, and 10. I didn't know the horse ever had bowed tendons until Mandela told me. He says, oh yeah, when he was a baby, bowed both tendons at 2. I said, this horse looks phenomenal. You would never tell that this horse ever bowed a tendon, ever. So when you give a horse the proper amount of time, they can heal from a lot of these things that we tend to run them through. And there's 2 ways, right? And you know it. With cars, you can either drive a car and tune it up and keep it oiled and take care of it, and it'll last for years. Or you could do nothing and drive it into the ground, and then you just have to give it away and go get a new car. It's the same thing with horses. It's the same thing with anything. They can handle certain things. When they tell you they need a break, they need a break. But when you give them a break, they a lot of times come back better. And what some people don't necessarily understand, I was asked to train a horse once. I saw the horse win it 2 at Saratoga. I loved the horse. And I asked the owner, hey, look, if you ever want to make a trainer change, I saw the horse training one day and I just approached the owner, I want to train this horse. And they said, well, he's in this big barn and, who knows, but whatever. So the horse wins impressively and is made. And I said, look, we were friends. So I said, if you ever change your mind, happy to train the horse for you. Find out the horse has a chip in an ankle. Okay. And I heard that through other things. The owner didn't know the horse had a chip in an ankle, which was the first thing that pissed me off. It was the fact that the trainer knew, somehow I knew, and most people on the racetrack knew he had a chip. The owner doesn't even know he has a chip. So the horse is going to run a stake off of an impressive maiden win with a chip in an ankle. I said, well, that's it. He's done. I said, he'll either be 2 types of horses. He will be a horse that wins and the chip doesn't bother him. Or he's going to be a horse that when he has to run, that chip pisses him off and he never wants to run that speed again. Okay. He was the latter. Ran, looked impressive. When you have adrenaline going in the early part of a race, a lot of horses look pretty good, right? Front end stuff, hind end stuff. If they're sore behind, they take, 3/8 to a half mile to warm up and then they find their hind end. Front end is the opposite. Once they start fatiguing, they start feeling that pain. So horse looks good, hits the quarter pole, doesn't look so good, starts pulling himself up. Horse is then given time off for a chip that happened in the race, right?
Right.
Then horse comes back. Trainer runs the horse runs dead last. Okay. Owner moves the horse to another trainer, runs the horse twice, dead last twice. Then they pick up the phone and call me. Hey, do you want the horse? I said, look, I've been watching this horse. He keeps running out the back. Well, you can fix it. You're this good claiming trainer. You fix all these horses. You can fix them, right? So I said, sure, I'll do my best. Bring him in the barn. Horse is mentally shot, blown, doesn't want to run anymore. He felt pain once because of a chip in an ankle, never wanted to do it again. So I told him, I said, look, if we geld him, it might change his mind. They said, no, we don't want to geld. Just put him in a claiming race and let's see what happens. So I dropped him in for 50. He ran 4th. He had no issues, no physical ailments. All joints were clean. They took the chip out. But the one experience of having that chip, and it's the same thing with bleeders. People don't know why bleeders stop. A lot of times bleeders stop, sometimes because A, they can't get their air and they struggle with it. But a lot of times they get scared because they're having trouble with their air or the taste of blood. So when they run back, they don't want to push to that point where they felt that discomfort the first time. So that's the difference with good horse and bad horse. And people are like, well, what's the difference? So you'll watch races, John, you see it all the time. Claiming race runs in the same time as the stake. Everybody's like, well, why can't the claimers run against stake horses? Difference is stakes horses will run through anything. Cheaper horses will not, typically. So a lot of these small ailments that happen because a horse doesn't get time bites an owner, because if the horse got the time, and it's not the owner's fault, a lot of this sometimes falls in different positions, right? Sometimes the owner knows, but in the case I told you, the owner didn't know the horse had a chip. The horse was if I recall, a $375,000 yearling. He only won 1 race in his career.
Wow.
So you make a different call, horse chips, trainer calls, says, hey, look, he chipped, let's give him time, bring him back. He's probably still a really good horse. So I can tell you, this horse would breeze in 45 with the feet on the dash in the morning. Horse was a monster. Took him in the afternoon. He knew exactly what could happen. There's a chance that he could feel pain and he didn't want to run.
I'd like to write it down to do a show someday in the future where we talk a lot about the mental aspect of a racehorse as opposed to the physical. Do they know when they win? Do they know when they lose? How do you tell the ones that are competitive and want to win? How do you recognize the ones, like you said, have had an issue and now they just don't want to try? I remember once when I was very, very young and first getting some experience around the backside, an exercise rider who was a friend of mine galloped the horse and came back and showed me this. He goes, what a horse, man. He goes, man, if his mind was different, he beat anybody. I'm like, what's wrong with his mind? He goes, he's just a cheater. I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, he just won't try, man. He just you just can't get him to try. You ever get him to try, he'll run away from all these horses, but he just cheats, man. He just gets there and then just says, no, you know what? I ain't gonna try. And they just couldn't get the horse to try unless he was just, happened to be in that mood. And it was only once in a while in the morning where he'd be in that mood and he'd, run away from and hide from grade 1 horses. But, in the daytime, race time, he'd run and he'd move up there and, he'd be like, I could beat these guys, but he just wouldn't do it, and they just could never mentally get him to want to try. And I never knew what the reason was. I don't know if they ever did. And he had a hell of a trainer. His trainer was Sidney Waters, who trained a lot of
great trainer.
Really good horses back then. And I would remember standing around the barn in Saratoga and him just saying, man, I just wish I could figure this guy out, because he's a running son of a gun. You just won't do it unless he wants to,
Well, you see it with human athletes too. And I think a lot of people think horses are different, and they're very similar to any human athlete. They just have 4 legs and they can't communicate with you. They do through body language, which is why as a trainer, you have to pick up on body language, what they want to do, what they don't want to do. I'll a lot of times watch a race, which is kind of how we got better at claiming over the years. And they'll say, this horse isn't all out. And somebody will say, how do you know it's not all out? I said, I can kind of tell this horse is just there. There's another gear he hasn't turned it on yet. And if somebody can turn on that gear, well, then we're good. But you'll find, there's certain tales that you'll hear from these professional athletes where they'll say, God, there was a guy I played with in high school, could dominate me. Guy was a monster, but you couldn't get him to work. Well, who's in the NBA? The guy with little less talent who worked. Not the one who had all the talent and didn't. So it's the horse side, and we'll delve into this on another episode because it's actually fascinating stuff. I've worked with some of the fastest biggest losing horses in their careers. I mean, I've been around $1.7 million babies who could blow the doors off of anything. Take them over in the afternoon, they didn't want to put in an effort, and that was it. And you know, and it's the same. You'll have human athletes all the time that have all the talent in the world and have no drive to do it. And just is what it is. They're motivated by different things.
Yeah, that'll be an interesting show. I'm really fascinated with the, you know, the mental aspect of the athlete as well. So I guess that's a wrap.
Yeah.
For Michael and the kind of say what you want about Michael Wilson. The man pays his debts, even on television, on YouTube, where everybody could see it. Showed up as announced in the clown suit because of Secret Oath. You'll always have to remember Secret Oath now. She's going to be a very special filly in your career.
Oh, absolutely.
Even though you didn't buy her when you tried and didn't get her, but now she earned her way in a different way, immortalizing you in a clown suit on Pastor Wyatt TV, Unfiltered.
I'll have to screenshot our video of this and have Wayne Lucas sign it. I'll put it on a wall. That'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely. This definitely belongs on a wall. Hey, everybody, thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed this show. We got a lot more coming, a lot of great topics, a lot of great guests, all kinds of stuff lined up as we move forward. You got questions, we got answers, send them in, but we'll keep rolling along. Thank you, Mr. Wilson.
Thank you, John.
I'll shut us off and we could say goodbye off the air. So ciao for now.
Fighting back, coming down to the finish. If a picture is worth 1,000 words, this is one stunning picture. Honorary leads, pull out now, second on the outside. They're coming down the line. 1,000 words has done it.
Nobody does it better.